guys, what's up? Serena Appiah here from thriftdiving.com, and this is Kojo. And today we are standing in our backyard, which I have to admit is a little boring. It's boring because there's nothing out here for the kids to really do. So they end up spending all their time inside on video games. Well, with today's project, we're going to pull them outside of the house because we are building a competitive beanbag toss game. So are you ready to build this?
Yeah.
Are you going to help?
Yeah.
All right, so here are the materials that we need for this project. You'll need 2 pieces of 1/4 inch plywood, which is perfect for when you're joining fabric to wood. And we're also going to use this riveter by Arrow Fastener. Now, by using rivets, we will be able to join mesh pockets to the plywood. And the rivets, they actually come in 3 sizes: short, medium, and long. And when using 1/4 inch plywood, I found that the medium rivets work best. So that's what we're going to use for this project. And if you want more information about how to use the riveter, check out the blog post that goes along with this project. You'll also need rivet washers. These are important because the wood and the fabric will be sandwiched between the rivet and the rivet washer. That's what's going to hold them together. Head to the fabric store, pick up about 1 yard of mesh fabric. And in order to drill the holes, we'll use a drill bit that's about the same size as the rivets that we'll be using, which is going to be the 1/8 inch drill bit. On the packet of rivets, it'll tell you the size of the rivet, so I tend to use a drill bit that's about the same diameter. And you know I love power tools, so you know we can't do this project without power tools. There are 2 tools that we need: a jigsaw for cutting and a power drill for drilling. The plywood comes in 48 inch heights, but we're going to cut ours down to 36 inches instead. So now that we've cut these pieces of plywood down to 36 inches, we are ready for the next step, which is where we're going to take a container and we're going to just trace it out. We are going to create some holes for the bean bags to be thrown into these little beanbag games. So let's go ahead and get our jigsaw and our pencil and let's cut out some circles. So as I was tracing out the circles, I realized that they were too small. So I erased them and started over with a larger diameter and used the bowl instead, centering the bowl and tracing about 7 inches from the top. Keep this in mind when tracing your circles. What size do you want them to be? In order to cut out the beanbag holes, I had to first drill a hole in the circle so that I could insert my jigsaw blade to begin cutting. I had to do this for all 12 holes. There were 6 on each beanbag game. So I went ahead and did those. Really easy, very quickly, and then I took some sandpaper and smoothed out all of the circles. Next, I glued a board onto the backs of the games, and it was the same width as the game. This is the board that I would later use to attach the hinge for the kickstand so that it could stand up. And I was excited that it was actually turning out. They looked great. Now on to the mesh. I have to admit I've never worked with mesh before and I was a little worried about how I would be able to join it together, but I didn't let that stop me. I used the cutout circles as a pattern and cut 12 mesh circles that would make up the pockets. And I also cut 12 long strips of mesh that would also make up the pockets as well. So I folded the mesh strips in half and used a long zigzag stitch to sew together just that one edge. Now, if you don't have a sewing machine, it's not a problem. You can use no-sew fabric tape. I've used it on many projects and it works and holds really well. It's pretty simple to use. Then I used a zigzag stitch to join the mesh circle onto the end of this little sleeve that I built. And what I was left with is this amazing little pocket that, you know, I can actually carry a beanbag in there now. Okay, so our pockets are sewn. We have 12 pockets. One of them we actually did a little test sample with to make sure that it fits into the beanbag hole, and it does. Now, before we can actually attach these with the rivets to the beanbag games, we have to paint them first. For this project, I wanted a brilliant red color, so that's what I did, and I added 2 coats for even coverage on the front and the back, and I wanted it to fully dry so that I didn't get any paint on the mesh fabric. Just a little tip, if you use a roller, it goes much faster. And finally, I had a helper. Kojo and I started out using a soft black, but we found that was kind of boring, and plus, we ran out of paint. Well, we're almost done this project. We've got black paint and
Red paint.
Red paint. Now let's go ahead and drill some holes for the rivets, shall we?
Of course.
Let's do it. Before drilling holes for the rivets though, I cut the 1x4 boards using a miter saw. You can use a jigsaw too, that's fine. This is scrap wood that I had on hand and I found that it was perfect for making the kickstands that would support the beanbag games. And I used my pocket hole jig to drill pocket holes in order to screw them together, but you can easily use wood glue. Don't feel like you have to get all fancy. Just go ahead, use wood glue, clamp it, and it'll be a nice, secure, tight kickstand for your beanbag game. So before drilling, I took a piece of scrap wood and put it underneath of my plywood. This helps to prevent tear out when drilling into your wood. I drilled holes at 12 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 9 o'clock. And then I did an additional 4 holes evenly spaced around the circle for a total of 8 holes. And what I learned is I probably should have drilled and sanded before painting, but it still looks good and it still turned out great. I couldn't wait to get to this part. It was time to finally add the rivets. I used the medium length rivets, plugging them into the drilled holes, and you can see that there's just enough of a rivet on the bottom to catch and snag the mesh fabric from down below. Because the mesh is stretchy, it was easy to hook the mesh onto each of the 8 rivets all along the circle. The most important part is to use rivet washers. This is what will hold the mesh to the wood. Riveting is a 3-step process. It's a matter of holding the washer on, sliding the riveter over the long stem of the rivet, and then squeezing. Now take a look at what happens here in slow motion. When I'm squeezing that riveter handle, it's pulling that rivet tight, creating a little bulb. And that bulb is what's holding that washer on. That mesh is not coming off of the fabric. It is tight. And with a couple squeezes, the rivet pops off, leaving the fabric secured. Just be sure to wear your eye protection too. And when it comes off, it'll make a pop sound, which is the reason why they're also called pop riveters. So riveting was a lot of fun, and I guarantee if you ever need to join fabric to wood, rivets are the way to go. So this is what it looked like when I was done. I had a lot of metal rivets showing, and I wanted to cover them up, so I decided that I was going to paint them. As I mentioned earlier in the video, we ran out of black paint, and I think it worked out perfectly because this blue paint is amazing. Huh? No! Kids are well-meaning, but touching mommy's camera is a big no-no. I needed to put Kojo to work, so I gave him the roller and said, here, you paint the kickstands, and he enjoyed it. He did a great job. So because I ended up painting this after I added the rivets, it probably made sense to just wait until the end to paint. If that's what you do, just be very careful, otherwise you'll get paint on the mesh. Just a couple more steps. So I cut some stencils with my cutting machine, but you can use ready-made stencils. That will work fine. I added point values for each hole and then stenciled blue team and red team. The last step was to add some hinges to the kickstand and then connect the other side of the hinge to the beanbag game. And then Kojo and I were all done and it was time to test it out. But then the most unfortunate thing happened. So it's pretty funny that we captured that on camera. It looks like the beanbags were too heavy and my son was too strong for the wood glue to hold the top of the game together. So 2 small screws, we fixed that problem and it was fine. The beanbag games were a big hit with my son and his friend, and I found that the beanbags were a little too heavy for the 1/4-inch plywood, so I'll likely find some lighter bags or use lighter balls. But overall, it turned out great and it gives the kids something fun to do in the backyard. So if you enjoyed this project, be sure to check out the full blog post for the materials list and additional information. And to learn more about the riveter from Arrow Fastener, you can find them at arrowfastener.com. Be sure to check me out for more DIY projects at thriftiving.com.